This is Coda Radio, episode 240 for January 16th, 2017. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode's brought to you by our two fine sponsors, DigitalOcean and Scale Your Code. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week, like the soldier he is at the keyboard, with a drink in his hand, why yes, folks, is Mr. Michael Dominic. Hello, Mike!
Chris, I am here for you today.
Oh, yeah, I do need...
This is a judgment, let's be honest, full zone.
Yeah, yeah, there might not be much judgment between you and I, but there is an audience listening.
Yes, I did check my email as promised.
Yeah, and?
I won't do that again.
Oh, that's right.
No, it wasn't as bad.
I forgot.
You know what? The gin and juice in my hand helps. Snoop was right.
Well, that's nice. That's good. I just have an ice water here. Once again, the JB Studios. You know, it's just if I could add like maybe powdered alcohol to a glass and then drink that on the show, that I think would be the perfect Coda Radio, because then I could just have like dried alcohol, like if you had forgotten like those vitamin C packets, just like that. You add it to the water, it fizzes up. Now you got yourself a lovely cocktail. I'm just an idea guy, Mike. Somebody else has got to run with that, but I think it's a great idea.
Can I have equity in your idea? Is that what you're telling me? I could build the actual factory for the... Oh, sorry.
You could at least build that back-end bot. Something's got to process the orders. Well, I got papers right here that tell me it is a hell of an episode. And one of the other things, my instinct, I got instincts on this thing 240 in. When we delete entire sections and add sections of the show notes because of how we're feeling fired up in the pre-show, usually going to be a good show.
It's going to be a rough one for you. I mean, it's going to be a good one.
Do you want to start with the feedback so we can just sort of like...
Yeah, you know what? I'm liking the classic the classic flow from last week.
Plus, it doesn't make us seem like insane sons of bitches because we at least spend a few minutes talking rationally before we get into the really crazy stuff.
Well, and I get to get deeper into my drink. So when we do get there, it's going to be more fun.
You know, a more professional operation would have checked to see if the video capture was working in the show. But here on Coda Radio, I was too busy ranting and raving in the pre-show about my hardware situation that I actually forgot to check the camera input. But this all relates back to things that are going to come up later in the show. So I will read this email. And those of you that are watching, well, you're in the minority anyways, so I'm sorry. But Paul has a healthcare experience, which he wanted to write in about. He says, I have an observation and a follow-up question on my hopes in starting an IT business. Mike, you mentioned that you were paying $575 a month and $200 for vision. It turns out I pay a similar amount for similar coverage. He's got Blue Cross Pro under my current employer with just over 100 employees in downtown Chicago. I live just over the Indian border, so I hope this means the Indiana border. I live on a reservation. I live just over the Indiana border, so I hope this means I can get similar deals once I have my business up and running. Now I just need some clients. That brings me to my follow-up question, though. What might be the best way to get clients? Is it worth it to get a search engine ad or pay some sales firm? How do you build up a clientele? Boy, is this not the real question?
So I've spent about a year or 7 trying to figure this out. And let me tell you what a really, really good way to burn thousands of dollars is.
Yeah.
Hire a call setting firm.
Oh boy.
It's amazing how much money you can spend and not get back. Another great way to spend a bunch of money and get nothing back, Facebook ads. They are super effective at draining your bank account.
Yeah, the only kind of Google ad that would ever work for you is something that is actionable almost in the moment the user clicks the link. Yeah. So if you had something to offer them that was immediately actionable, then that might work.
So the only types of ads that have ever worked for me, and to be honest, they don't work in numbers. And full disclosure, I am still studying this, and I'm constantly like
it's an art. You're constantly never stop.
Traditionally, the best way but let's backpedal a little bit, right? If you want to advertise, I don't think advertising is actually the best way to get clients.
Yeah, it's not. It's not at all.
It's really inefficient. But if you feel the need to advertise, having an advertisement that says, let's just say you're an app developer, right? Hey, I can get an app for your business. Well, doesn't work. You need to have like a transactional offer. Do you know what really works? Podcast ads, or ads that are like podcast ads, where it's, in fact, and this is not me blowing Chris's skirt up, and it is a lovely skirt. I mean, it's got frills.
I really appreciate that you noticed that. I put a lot of effort into that.
I think you hand sewed it myself, but honestly, the most effective ad I ever ran was on Jupiter Broadcasting, and this is not me plugging. I am not being paid for this. Where I did it 6 months ago, right? It was like email and use the code Angela or something like that at the time, because Angela is the one who set it up.
Yeah, something like that.
And like we did a documentation discovery for like 50% off or something. But I mean, other than it being funny, because the listener, and I think I ran it at the very end of Faux Show, is I think exactly when I did it too. It's effective because, one, I knew the Jupiter Broadcasting audience was technical. While maybe they are not my ideal client because they're developers themselves, their manager almost certainly is, right? Someone who's going to outsource their mobile work. But more importantly, you put a clock on it. So it was, what was it, Chris? It was like a month. You had a month, right? It was like the month of...
Yeah. Usually, and that means 4 spots. So usually if somebody's jumping around a bit, they get a chance to hear it.
And the deal was I gave like the run of the ad plus half a month. If you use the code then, you got the deal. So what that also does for me is it tells me, well, is this effective? And, after, let's say, I don't remember the month I ran it, but let's say I ran it last September. Well, by mid-November, I would basically know how many people responded. Also, podcast ads are far cheaper than Google ads.
Yeah, especially ones here. And it's not that it's just because we don't have we don't have like mass tech shows. We have very specific tech shows, so we have more focused sponsors, which means that we don't come in and say, well, you have to pay us $20,000 for every 1,000 or whatever right. Laporte charges. Like Laporte just gets nuts numbers because he's got a name, he's got a brand, and he's got a general tech audience.
It's a lot, yeah.
I having done the sponsor ads now for years, I definitely have a sense of how we perform for our sponsors, which is really, really well. And in fact, better than Twit, better than a lot, depending, because it's not just how well you perform, but it's also how you charge, how much, and how it's all structured. So we try to make it a good value. But I would say this: that's only really going to work if you have something you can offer to the general world. If you were looking for local clientele, that's not going to do it for you, Paul. Because unless we happen to, for some reason, have a phenomenal following in your neck of the woods, you're not going to reach very many people in your area. I would say, Paul, I wouldn't even worry about advertising until
I wouldn't either.
You worry about it at this. This is your benchmark. When you have someone on staff who's waiting around for leads, and you can afford ads to help supplement their lead generation, and then they will take the incoming lead, they'll act on it immediately, they'll schedule things, they'll figure out if they're a good client, and they'll come back to you with that. That's when you're at the point where you should buy advertising. Until you're at that point, advertising is not going to do dick for you. If you want local clients, this is something I'd experimented with at the beginning of last year. I would really recommend, if I get a chance, I might try it again for 2017. I just kind of had an opportunity, so I jumped at it. I would look around. You'd be surprised to find out how many of your local businesses are part of referral groups or part of business groups. And
Chambers of Commerce.
And a lot of Chambers of Commerce, a lot of times they're looking for a computer guy, an IT guy, or a developer specifically, because all of these businesses are starting to need little things here and there. And I attended 2 different groups, one here, the business group where my business is located, and one where Hadia's business is located. And in both groups, they had just recently found a developer that they were just whenever any of the businesses needed development work, they went to that guy, or anyone that they wanted to refer. And the way the group works is they incentivize the members to refer other people outside the group to the members of the group. So the people of the group are working for you in a sense. And it's a part of a system. It's a structure. You got to go to these dumb meetings and have, these events that you got to go to and stuff like that.
You're going to drink a lot of watered down beer.
Yeah.
And a lot of rubber
You're going to
chicken.
socialize with people that don't have any idea what you do because, one of them's running the local paper. Another one is a doctor, right? They're not in you. But you have a common goal.
I would caution you, though, because and that's a mistake I made for a very long time was like writing off people like that.
Sure, yeah.
But the guy who runs your local penny saver probably knows every business in the area because he tries to sell them ads.
And I bet they have software. Something tells me they have software.
I bet they have a website too.
So this would be like a good way to sort of build a client base initially because really, Paul, the super truth of the matter is the only way you're really going to get clients initially is by who you know. And if you don't know anybody, you better get knowing people. You got to go meet some people.
So let me take that a step further. And then I have a pro tip that I probably shouldn't share, but it works. One, the best way to grow your business if you're small is, and by like Buccaneer is super small, right? We're small. It's do good work, get referrals. That is the most effective way to get more business. Yeah.
And have people and have your services be something that people need. That so that way when they refer you, okay. It's really about who you know, and if you don't know, then you've got to fix that situation. And I would sort of do some local networking, dig around, and you could just ask if you patron any of your local businesses while you're in there, you could say if you're talking to the person that owns it, hey, are you a member of a referral group? Do you know if I didn't even really realize this was a thing until last year, and it sort of opened my eyes as a great way to get business. So I would say look at that stuff over advertising for a long time.
There is one little dirty trick you can do.
Yeah, I want to hear this.
In fact, I am going to Florida in a couple weeks, and then after that, I'm going to an SBA conference in Orlando, and then after that, I'm going to a very special place in Denver that we'll talk about shortly. Go to conferences, but don't necessarily buy tickets for all the sessions. Every hotel's got a bar. Seriously, if the session is not necessarily directly in your benefit, hang out at the bar for about an hour.
Yeah, especially because you can't really talk during sessions. So your chances are when you're coming in and going out.
Well, that's one of the reasons I often don't really see the value in me going to WWDC because it's so damn expensive. And really, my goal is to like sit at the bar and run into one guy who wants to subcontract me some iOS work.
Yeah, or the stuff going around the conference, I was going to say. So like, I don't remember, I was trying to remember the name of it, but there's like a community run event at WWDC for all the people that didn't make it.
AltConf.
Okay, yeah. There's those kinds of things where you could do networking. But like, so you take your average conference, your best stuff is going to be in the main floor and out in the entranceways and maybe at the restaurants around the conference.
Restaurants, pubs, things like that, yeah.
That's a good tip. That's a Michael Dominic pro tip. Now, we have an entry in here from Medium almost once a week, and I've generally been pretty impressed. So it seems to be the platform people are going to these days. And this guy is an Android developer, I'm led to believe because, get this, the Twitter handle @DevilDroid. That's or DeveloDroid. That sounds like a developer. And it's about Flutter. What the heck is Flutter?
Yeah, so actually Ian shared this. He emailed me. He literally just emailed me the link. So I just went ahead and sent the link in. Flutter is a Dart-based cross-platform mobile app development toolkit. I don't know much about it. He had asked me to take a look at it and mention it on air. Like I did a brief 10-minute look. Looks interesting. I mean, for my purposes, it's probably not something that makes sense, right? Because, the customers I talk to know Angular, they know Xamarin, they don't know Dart at all, or Flutter rather. But I picked it out of the few emails we got because all my ragging on Dart, and there seems to actually be momentum in Dart now. This cross-platform toolkit, I'm actually seeing some very interesting kind of front-end web development frameworks being written in Dart and some UI toolkits, which I thought Dart was dead, Chris. I mean, did I just miss the boat here? I'm batting 1,000. They're always being wrong. So hey.
Well, you definitely don't hear a lot of talk about it.
Yeah.
So I guess on that meter, it seems to be low. Like on the Fed, like if it was like a EKG, like beep beep, it's kind of like a pretty weak beep in terms of buzz. All right. Well, that's amazing. Okay, that's it. That's all our hoopla for this week. Now we're just gonna get into this.
Have hoopla.
Well,
we have
that's
hoopla.
okay. That's true. That was the feedback. Now it's the hoopla that's probably going to get me upset. This is probably where things are going to go off the track. So, why don't we save a little face first and thank DigitalOcean for sponsoring this here episode of the Coder Radio program. Yes, that's right, DigitalOcean. Use our promo code CoderDigital. Apply it to your account after you've signed up, or if you already have signed up, and you get a $10 credit. DigitalOcean is a simple cloud hosting provider dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way for you to spin up your own server on their impressive infrastructure. Linux for the virtualizers, or Linux for the host servers, KVM for the virtualizer. They have SSD storage for all of the disk, so you get super fast disk access, 40 gigabit hypervisor connections to the internet. That's amazing. Then they combine it all with a very intuitive, easy-to-use interface. And they have data centers in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, London, Toronto, Germany, and India. I think that's so cool. And also, a big point of usage here at JB now is their API. The interface is amazing, and if you're a beginner or an expert, you're really going to appreciate it. But the API is what makes using DigitalOcean as easy as telling one of our bots to turn something on. And I do it before every show, and I just love it. It's such an easy way to integrate the DigitalOcean infrastructure into the infrastructure that we already have here. It's so smooth. And the pricing is perfect. For 3 cents an hour, you can get 2 gigs of RAM, a 2-core processor, a 40 gigabyte SSD, and 3 terabytes of transfer. And you want to experiment with something, you're doing a project, or you need a little temporary infrastructure, or maybe you just want to throw something up on a fast public server to have somebody else test and bang on something for you. Shoot, I'll just do it when I'm only going to be using the command line for a while. I'll sometimes just work from my DigitalOcean droplet because I'll use SSH and I'll connect in, and you can use Screen or Mosh, which is super cool. Mosh I really love because on what it will survive a sleep and suspend from my laptop, and I can change networks. So I'll start a Mosh session to my DigitalOcean droplet here at the studio, and I can close my laptop, go home, open up from my MiFi connection at home. My Mosh connection reconnects, which is just SSH on the back end, and I'm back and working on my DigitalOcean droplet. 3 cents an hour. It's so outrageously great. DigitalOcean.com. Use our promo code CoderDigital, and a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. And that's that CoderDigital promo code, which is just one word. You apply it to your account. So do you want to talk about this move from Java to Dart before we get too far off the rails here?
I do. So David Moore, who is David Morgan, who is a Google engineer. He works on the AdWords team. We've actually featured a couple of his posts before, but I don't know if we've actually mentioned his name. He is talking about how he moved his part of AdWords from Java to Dart. And I think it's a great post. I'm not going to go into so much detail. For those who don't know, Dart is a Google replacement for Java, right? It's a web programming language. And it's particularly meant to be Java-esque. I don't know. I just felt like there was something happening here, right? I don't particularly think it's worth my time to invest in Dart. I think the stronger, in the web world, the things that seem to be really taking over are, React, which I don't like. And Angular is still hanging on, but also Vue.js. Have you heard of this, Chris?
No. I have heard of, before you go any further, one thing I want to stop. Because I have heard of, you mentioned it, or somebody in the audience mentioned it, but this is something he said before you go too far off on his post. I lost it. Dang it. He makes a great point here that I wanted to ask you about. I'll keep looking for it. Because he's talking about some of the great features of the SDK, and this is part of what Dart's SDK, which I can kind of grok where he's coming from. I will continue to look for it, see if I can find the article. But tell me, continue, Mr. Dominic.
Yeah, I mean, with ECMAScript 6, right, ES6, otherwise known as, good JavaScript, although I still don't think you need classes. I'm just going to kind of throw that out there. I thought I saw, and I still do think I do, a cooling in the kind of fervor of all these JavaScript replacements, right? Remember there was, I think the first one was CoffeeScript, then there was Dart, and now there's, of course, TypeScript, which is also doing well. I don't know. I see a lot of JavaScript still, being written, and particularly with ECMAScript 6, you have a lot of the advantages of if you really wanted like a classical type system for classes, right? You have that, or you you can have that. It's a situation where you don't have to use it. Like I probably wouldn't, but you can use it if
Here's his
I don't
point
know.
that he made. He said, Dart, I found it. Dart is ready for prime time. You can build huge mission critical web applications in it, as we did with AdWords for video. That's okay. That's got to be a pretty big scale mission critical application.
No, yeah, it's a powerful language.
And
like this, yeah.
he says, or you can take Flutter and start building mobile apps for Android and iOS.
Yep.
And as my recent articles will have shown, Dart on the server goes really well with Dart on the client. So he's saying what you have here is something that builds incredibly large-scale, mission-critical applications. Combining it with Flutter, you can develop for Android and iOS. And, oh, by the way, works great on the server side.
Well, that's what Ian was sharing, right? The Flutter framework for Android and iOS.
Yeah.
My problem with all of these technologies, though, is unless I'm starting a greenfield project, I've always found it awkward to try to use like a Dart or a CoffeeScript. Now, to be fair, I've had more experience, a lot more with CoffeeScript because Rails made it the default, and I think Rails 4. I mean, it was a long time ago. But I think we actually talked about it in the back catalog. I was grumpy then too. Yeah, I don't understand why these exist. Right. That is my problem. People always ask me, well, what's your problem with all the JavaScript frameworks? React is kind of a different case. My issue with React is it's solving a problem most people don't have. Also, Facebook's licensing is terrible. The issue with like these JavaScript replacements, these, particularly CoffeeScript and TypeScript, but also Dart to a lesser degree, is that it's solving a problem of JavaScript is hard and weird and finicky and has a lot of history.
Yep.
But I'm always working with code that's legacy. I don't get a whole lot of file new projects these days.
Oh, shit.
So
Did your pragmatic attitude about this just crash all of this hype down? You're right. You're never working with an ideal situation in the real world.
Well, the problem is, like, when you're super junior, yeah, you might get a file new project, but like, people hire me, like, and they bring me in on something that's like been totally screwed up.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. That's the
and
real
I'm not going to
world.
rewrite the whole thing in TypeScript or Dart. So I don't know. Like, I definitely understand that, like, in a Hightower style alternate universe where JavaScript didn't exist, that like Dart would be a great choice. And so with TypeScript, I still think CoffeeScript is deeply misguided. But the problem is that like compiling Dart or TypeScript into JavaScript, which is how they work in the browser, seems crazy to me, and like a level of indirection that, and to be clear, I am talking about front end browser side development here. I am not talking about using it like on a server or anything like that.
Or even, okay. Not talking Flutter.
Well, if you were doing file new and doing a Flutter project, I'm sure that's fine.
Okay.
But I'm talking about company, Acme Co calls me and is like, yo, so we outsourced this and it's all screwed up, but we don't want to rewrite it. Enterprise customers don't want to rewrite things, right? That's not the world they live in. So the idea that I'm then going to now split their project up into two languages seems crazy. And you could say, well, CSS is already another language, HTML is already another language, but really they're not, right? Like a business logic language like JavaScript, and I know it can be done, and I know people say they've been successful with it. I just don't think it makes sense. In fact, the only time I've ever split a project into two languages was an iOS app in Objective-C and Swift, and it worked. Every other case, and that's because Apple did a lot of work to make that work, right? Every other case has been, like an Android project or an old school iOS project where I just needed to do something with graphics or video, and I had to do it in C or C++. Or like a Rails thing where you back in Rails 2 or 3, you wrote a C library for Ruby. Other than that, and particularly narrowing down to the scope of web application programming, unless I'm file new, I really don't understand. And I just don't think it's a really good idea for the customer for me to just arbitrarily decide to write the feature they hired me to write in a different programming language. That just seems crazy to me, Chris. Maybe I'm like old and grumpy these days. It's possible.
No. No, not it, not at all. You know, you were dropping the Swift bomb in there, and there's a bit of a news bomb this week, and I'm really interested to get your take on Chris Latner leaving Apple, going over to Tesla. Now, I can't remember because it's been a year and a half or so since we were really talking about this, but wasn't Latner's name the one I saw in all the commits to the early GitHub repo?
Well, Latner's, he was an LLVM big time contributor. He actually spearheaded Clang over at Apple. He's basically the father of Swift, if we can use that term of art.
He seemed like he was definitely he started at the compiler level, got that accomplished, and then really kind of came in swinging with his. Well, I would assume he seemed to be the champion of Swift. I imagine there's probably a big team working on it now, so it's not really one guy's project anymore. But it still seems like a pretty significant departure.
I don't want to get too much into the kabuki theater of like, is this because Apple's been losing a lot of deep engineering talent to Tesla, which is where Latner went. I don't know. Like he's also, and you might find this interesting, Chris. He is personally responsible for getting Apple to open source Swift, or so the story goes.
Oh, really?
And this is Mike's crazy theory. So this is not. Remember, Mike's not a journalist, just kind of following what he thinks he sees. Maybe he wanted to be more community oriented, or maybe he just didn't find the challenges. Because remember, he was in charge of Xcode and like the language of Swift and the whole project environment. I don't know. Maybe the idea of self-driving cars is more interesting. Maybe you want to get back to the compiler. But I do wonder.
Just a point of note, just to sort of echo what you're saying there. This story broke via the Swift mailing list. Like a traditional really open source, like a lot of the stories we cover in Linux Action Show, they originate on the mailing list, and then everybody writes something up on the mailing list. Latner announced his resignation by posting to the Swift mailing list.
Yeah. So this is where my crazy theory comes in. Apple has lost a lot of, I would say, like more Unixy oriented engineering talent.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's not the design heavy and in particular secretive culture that makes them go for greener, more engineering focused pastures, i.e. Tesla. And it really is just Tesla. Like you can actually look this up. The amount of engineering talent leaving Apple to go to Tesla is, I'm not going to say concerning, but I would say it's greater than most other companies, right? It's a pretty significant number. So I don't know, or maybe he's a car guy, right? Anything's possible. I'm not trying to get into the kabuki theater thing though, but I do wonder, Apple does have the reputation as a very secretive design run company. And we've in the past, maybe a couple hundred episodes ago, talked about kind of tension between designers and developers. Is this a side product of that? Maybe not. Maybe it's just, hey, Chris wanted to go work on cars.
Yeah. I wonder too, Mike, and this is just, I don't really think this is a strong one. I'm just going to toss this out there. It's just something to chew on. I wonder too if, because you are right, thinking back at it, it's a lot of the next Unix guys. Right. I wonder if it's not just because Apple doesn't scratch that itch like it used to be. Like, I'm a Unix beard and I want the command line, but I also want a graphical interface and Adobe Photoshop and Microsoft Office. So I'm going to get a Mac. But I want to have. I met probably 100 of these types of people at BSD wasn't BSD Can. But Meet BSD in Berkeley, California.
That explains our next segment so well, but keep going.
Yeah, so I met a lot of these guys at Meet BSD. They were free BSD admins running MacBooks with terminals open into their free BSD servers. And they wanted these, and some of them were really old MacBooks, like really like the first metal MacBooks that I haven't seen in a long time. And I used to work at a school district, like really old stuff. And so seeing this, I realized like this is a real demo. There is a lot of guys in the engineering field and women in the engineering field and in the admin field. They're not necessarily developers. They're just maintaining BSD systems or Linux systems, and they're doing it from Macs because it was the work pay. I don't know how many. I think most of them their work paid for their laptops just based on the conversations I was having. And so it's not really even the cost of it isn't a factor. It's the pure practical aspect of it's pretty damn reliable, the hardware is good enough, and it's got a terminal. And that was really checking the boxes. And now you can get that from a lot of different sources. You can get that from Well, we're going to get into that. Where there's a lot of places you can scratch that itch now, and Apple, like you said, is not as interested in that. They're more interested in refining the design of what they probably feel like is a platform that's essentially matured.
Yeah, I mean, if you listen to Apple focus shows, which despite the hate mail, this is not, there's a lot of, I would call it discontent from the, you can see the difference, right? You can see the people who came into Mac because they were iOS or wanted to be iOS developers. And then you can see like the old NixBeards, and the old NixBeards are getting a little grumpy. There's a little bit of like, well, how come like Ubuntu looks good now? Ubuntu should always look bad, right? There's a little bit of maybe Mac isn't their priority. I don't know. I mean, we've talked about that at length. I kind of don't want to get into that conveation
Yeah,
just
I'm good.
yet.
Let's move on. I'm good.
Let's move on to Dell, because you know what, dude, you're getting Ubuntu.
You know what? I might. I don't know. That is a big story last week, and now this week I think I'm still chewing on it. Dell announced an update to their XPS 13 line. They also announced a new Precision 3520 mobile workstation, and I don't know if it's on this page. Doesn't look like it. They also announced an all-in-one sort of iMac type machine. That actually,
yes, the Surface Studio.
No, it doesn't fold down.
Yeah, I know.
But it's kind of like, it looks like a black iMac, a glossy black iMac with like some super legit speakers in the front potentially. So that it could be a decent machine for like a family PC. If you think about it, Ubuntu 16.04 is not a bad OS for a family PC, because then you're not dealing with viruses and
very stable.
Yeah. So this is perhaps, do you think, signaling a market trend that Dell is cashing in on, or what's your take on this, Mike?
We've been following this for a while, right? Disillusioned developers who are that kind of Unix beard, or in my case, Unix neck beard. Not quite full beard, but we want bash. Folks who were using a Mac because it's a Unix system that works, right? I mean, I think I used to say that in the early episode. Mm-hmm. And now it doesn't, or now they feel, for whatever reason, that they've been left behind.
Well, it's just not as practical. Now it doesn't have Ethernet. Well, guess what? My work machine, whenever I'm at my desk, I'm wired. I want Ethernet.
And now it doesn't get updated, and you get stupid crap like the touch bar. I see Ethernet, like, okay, maybe system admins care about that. I don't give a rat's ass about Ethernet.
If you're doing anything over the network consistently and you want good performance reliably, you end up being wired. Because when you're working on a system or a server, you don't want to be the cause of, when you're testing something, you don't want to be the cause of intermittent connections. You want to make sure it's
true.
I think most, or also just for me, I'm dealing with really large clips that are, the smallest are maybe 2 gigs, 1 gig. And so moving that over wireless it's not even just the inconsistent performance. It's just really unbearably slow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you that, like, compile times are kind of a big deal for me.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I will very briefly but significantly peg the CPU on my machine. Right. And before I had SSDs, I could listen to the hard drive crank like a mother. I mean, it was kind of sad.
Well, I had a fortunate opportunity to talk to Barton George, which is the guy running the Sputnik project at Dell. He's sort of the guy that's been running this whole Skunk Works operation all along and trying to get Dell to go in this direction. And he's very good, very diplomatic. He's very good at his job and very diplomatic at it. And so he didn't really come right out and say it, but I got him to essentially acknowledge that there have been recent decisions by a large market player that's making people look at these types of laptops more than ever, and they really are seeing. I think they're specifically seeing a high amount of adoption with the XPS 13 amongst developers. Was the impression I walked away with.
And obviously, like, I'm fickle as a cat, but I cannot see myself changing away from a Linux system at this juncture, particularly an Ubuntu system, actually. And I'm extremely happy with my System 76 Lemur. So the reality is, like, when it comes time to replace it, I'll probably look to them first.
Yeah, I
but
did a little comparison on Sunday's Linux Action Show.
I heard,
And overall, the Oryx, I think, was a touch more expensive by about $280, but it came with a GTX 10 series graphics, and the Dell came with a GTX 8 series graphics. That's a phenomenal difference. The Oryx would hands down win in any kind of GPU based task, which I happen to use.
Well, and the problem is if you're used to spending Apple money, like these things are cheap. I mean, we go back like 5 or 6 episodes if you didn't hear it in the back catalog, but I got the Lemur and I just basically maxed everything that I wanted to max out. Oh, and I can put more RAM in it when I want to. It's beautiful. Oh, and another hard drive. That you can't do with the Mac. I think that, Chris, would you agree that Apple's sort of opened a market segment for like prosumer developers, IT admins to shift towards Dell and System 76 and these kind of Linux-based systems?
Yeah, and I think it's sort of despite their total lack of marketing, because System 76 doesn't have a large marketing budget. I don't think they do. I don't think they do much beyond maybe display ads and some of the outreach they do on other podcasts and JB, and more that we're going to talk about in a moment. So there's very limited exposure there for them, and then the other places that link to them. And then Dell, they have a very large presence, but this particular product line of Dell is almost virtually unknown outside our audience.
It's super hard to find too. It's super hard to find.
Yeah. You really gotta go search it out. You gotta be looking for it. And so when you have a consumer who is actively seeking out your product, I think I don't really give the props to them so much as this. Dell got their stuff lined up and got their ducks in a row to have something for these people when they came looking, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And they're cashing in, I think, on a trend, rightfully so, as they should be. And what a good one for them to be getting on board with, because now they don't have that Microsoft monkey on their back directing the product direction.
Right. Well, and more importantly, if Dell does it, HP won't be far behind, right? Which, I am not the Linux advocate here, but I do want a competitive landscape for Unix workstations because I tend to buy them, right? I mean, it would be great for that to be a thing that there was some competition on. What kind of moron would go and buy a MacBook Pro now? What kind of sick, twisted sadist?
You are doing this to me on purpose. You are intentionally getting me riled up.
Someone who has devoted the better part of his adult life to advocating for Unix, particularly Linux, who runs, what is it? It's not the Apple Act. No. The Linux Action Show. Uh-huh. Oh, and by the way, do you like the touch bar? I mean, you just want to like swipe around? Or is this like a...
All right, so we're going to do this. We're going to do this. Is that what's going to happen right now?
Just stroke it a little.
Okay. Do you want to do this, or do we want to talk about my trip? What do you want to talk about
You
first?
went on a trip?
I'm going on a trip.
Well, I feel like we should do this because I don't think it's going to be as long as you think, and it's related to what we just talked about.
Oh, I think it's going to be. You sick bastard. So go ahead.
All right, so before we go any further, let's thank Scale Your Code. It's a new sponsor here on the Coder Radio program, scaleyourcode.com. It's a resource that surrounds you with industry experts who share their knowledge on scalability. I was looking at some of their interviews. They're awesome. And I thought this one was fascinating. This is the operations engineer at Etsy. Also, I think he authored Customizing Chef. He's created also just like a ton of open source projects around Chef. He did an interview over at scaleyourcode.com that looks at Etsy's current architecture and as well as their engineering culture, which I think is kind of an interesting aspect of Etsy. So you could check it out. It's probably one of at least 5 or 6 that I was looking at in just the last day that I just was like, I got to watch this one. I got to watch this one. I got to watch this one. They have also the founder of Ruby on Rails and the CTO of Basecamp and the chief architect at Reddit, and founding member of Netflix's first site reliability engineering team. It's a really great resource for professionals, for developers, for software engineers, or architects, or system administrators. I think this is pretty fascinating offering that they're making because it takes a lot of work to get these people that are super busy and sit down and do this really long form content. Like this Etsy interview is 45 minutes long. This is kind of a rare thing. Go to scaleyourcode.com, learn how others run their tools in production, and honestly, take advantage of the mistakes they've made so you don't have to make the same ones. And get a little idea of how their cultures work and see what might work in your area. That's a huge asset. ScaleYourCode.com. Go there and check them out. And a big thank you to Scale Your Code for sponsoring the Coda Radio program. ScaleYourCode.com. Go check them out and get access to interviews and all that good stuff and tutorials and all that. All right, Mr. Dominic, here's the thing.
Now, did you have to register with your local police bureau?
I want to make it clear, I do not own a MacBook, and I do not, the new one. I have an old 2013.
No, you haven't done it yet, but let me ask you a question. If you were to go into your browser history.
Nope. I actually haven't even done that. I haven't even done the fantasy config. Nope. And I also want to maintain that I still think it is a bad product, that is a massively underwhelming update after so long of a wait. And I've gotten emails from people that say the touch bar gets in the way. They accidentally set it off, and they say that the buttons, the interface changes all the time. It's no good. So I don't think if I was going to do it, I don't think I get a touch bar one unless it's the only way to get dedicated graphics. Here's my situation.
Which I think it is, but keep going.
I'm not going to buy one, but here's the reality I was dealing with, and this is actually what I was talking with the Beard about before we got on air, is I've got this vlog project I'm working on, and I feel so stupid when I say that word. I'll get over it. You
sound like a teenage girl, but keep going.
I know. And it's doing like super well. It's probably the most successful project I've ever launched. And boy, did I really, really, really get a sense of that when I think my Tuesday or Wednesday video got pulled down for a couple of days. And I've never gotten that much volume because it only affected people outside the U.S., which is where the majority of my audience is. But I spent the entire day responding to tweets and emails, and I tried to respond to all of them, and Reddit posts. And I got, the scale of the people who decide to go watch the vlog, and then they love it because it's a totally organic thing, and it's behind the scenes of stuff they've been listening and watching. People love it, and it's like this. Okay, I'm going to keep doing it kind of project. I don't know how I'm going to make it work, but it's one of the most successful things I've ever launched. Even if the numbers are great so far for something I just started a couple of weeks ago, but even besides that. It's just the engagement for the people who do tune in. I really get a good sense of, wow, this is a thing that is really taking off. And the reality is I have a couple of cameras now that shoot at extremely high resolution and high frame rates. One of my cameras is actually capable of shooting at 1,000 frames per second. The other camera that I use the most that shoots at a high it's a 4K camera at 60 frames per second.
What specific cameras are those?
The one's a Sony. The one that's a high frame rate is a Sony. Then the DJI Phantom 4 Pro is a 4K camera at 60 frames per second at 100 megabit data rate for the file. And that's the lower setting. And then I have traditional cameras that don't have as high a bit rates and they're fine. But when I'm working with the higher end footage, my 2013 laptop dies. Like it just chug.
Shit, Sherlock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine. It's to be expected. And that's when I realized, like, if that machine were to die tomorrow, or if Bitcoin was at $2,000 or something.
You keep dreaming.
I know. It got up to over 1,000 for a little while. That's where the Phantom came from. So if I had an opportunity, I would possibly consider getting one of those MacBooks if it could make my editing more doable, even if it only has 16 gigs of RAM. And that's a horrible thing. I hate to even say it because it's overpriced. It is underpowered, and it prioritizes things that I don't prioritize, and it doesn't have an SD card reader, which is how all of this footage comes into my laptop.
But you're a sucker for overpriced and underpowered. So let me just okay.
I would actually like to have an Oryx. It's just really the problem is Final Cut because I don't.
Right. I was gonna say it must be Final Cut. It was like the only because you are talking about, and I'm not even gonna attack you for like ragging on me forever and getting me to switch to Linux. I'm not even gonna go there.
Right.
Of like haranguing me for spending all that money I used to spend on Macs.
Well, don't characterize like this is my only computer.
No, but
I've got like
really,
12 computers. I mean,
you are real. Okay. I'm going to go to store.apple.com on my lovely Ubuntu system right now.
Now, let me tell you. So I really try hard not to make this show about the podcasting business or about video editing because people hate it when I do that. And so I really apologize. But I do need to give a little bit of context just so people understand
Yeah, but in this case, developers need. Well, they don't need. Okay, web developers don't, but like, it's just easier if you have VMs running and you have like multiple browsers and you're compiling things to have a high performance machine.
Yeah.
So.
A 2 terabyte high performance SSD would literally be a game changer for me because right now I have to successfully rsync off all of the previous day's footage. Yeah, you got to go 2 terabytes.
Slow it down for me. Oh, that upgrade alone is $1,200.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
All right, I'm assuming you want the higher end processor.
Because here's the thing: is I'm gonna run Linux on it too, so I have to have space for Linux. Yeah. No. What's the base processor?
The base is 2.7 gigahertz.
What's the? I should go look.
3.6 versus 3.8.
Go ahead and leave the base processor on there because that's still going to be better than mine.
Now, I have to imagine that 2 gigs of memory is not enough on the Radeon 455, which, by the way, is an old processor.
I mean,
so you're going to upgrade to 4, which probably is not long term going to be enough for you either. But
yeah, and the thing is like you kind of have to do it because you can't go back. Like there's no change in that.
Just with your storage upgrade and your 4 gigabyte graphics card, you are up to, without taxes now, Chris.
Yeah.
$4,099.
Yes, that's why it's not going to happen.
That's ridiculous. Okay, why are you even considering a MacBook Pro? If you were going to buy a Mac, why not wait a month and a half or whatever until the new iMacs come out?
I mean, I'm not going to buy one, so that's probably the strategy I'll take is wait and see if Apple pulls their head out of their butt in regards to performance and hardware and cost. But it's probably not likely. The real thing is Final Cut. I've really screwed myself because
does no one have an app like Final Cut?
No, I really don't think so. And I know everybody's going, but you know what, guys? I this is what I do every single night and every single day. Like I do it all day and all night long. Like I really know the tools I'm using, and in my opinion, for the workflow I have, there is nothing like it.
Oh, hang on, Chris. I forgot to mention that $4,100 machine I spec for you has 16 gigs of RAM.
Yeah, I know.
Just wanted to throw that out there.
I know. And a graphics card that's kind of really sad.
That was old the day it came out.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So I've also considered Hackintoshing. It's one of the things we were discussing. I just recently did another round of sort of a quick evaluation of that. And the problem is I'm not screwing around. I'm trying to get my job done. I'm trying to get work done, and I don't want to I don't want to mess around with a toy. And a Hackintosh it's the same problem I have with my Arch workstation upstairs, which is currently broken. Eventually, a bill's going to come due, and I'm going to pay it. An update isn't going to work, and Final Cut is one of these applications that is closely tied to the version of the operating system. And so, just like I have with the previous 4 Hackintoshes that I've owned, they'll eventually get dramatically out of date.
Right.
Even my actual legit Apple machines get out of date because I don't really like their operating system, so I don't tend to want to upgrade. And then all of a sudden, I'm 3 releases behind.
So let me ask you this horrible question, because I actually dual boot my Lemur because I have to have Visual Studio for some projects. What about like Windows? What about a like a powerful Windows workstation?
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely get a better price to hardware performance ratio, and I could get a machine that has
there are Windows applications analogous to Final Cut.
You know, Premiere is really great. It's pretty close. But now that I am in this crazy mixed frame rate, mixed speed universe, and I'm trying to avoid going into it just to bore people that don't give a crap about this, but suffice it to say, Final Cut is doing some really great magic for me in real time without any re-rendering or transcoding required. And it makes getting a daily thing out that's very highly well produced possible. And without the kind of those key components, and Premiere is close, but it still doesn't float my boat, especially in the way the UI is laid out and things like that. It just still doesn't do it for me.
The problem for me is I'm all about like investing in your business. Like $4,000 is a lot of money, but you know what? If that's what you need, that's what you need. The problem is this machine is not at all future proofed.
Exactly.
I mean, I will eat my hat if Apple doesn't release a rev that's like significantly more.
Now, there's probably a MacBook Pro owner listening and say, well, that's not true at all. The Thunderbolt 3 USB-C combo port gives me infinite expandability externally.
You know, that's not realistic. I mean, then just buy a freaking desktop, right?
Yeah, if that was realistic, I wouldn't be considering a laptop with 2 terabytes of SSD storage.
Right, and they wouldn't even offer that. We should probably get off the MacBook hate train because we talk about it a lot. But
actually, it's a really, I think the lesson I take away from this, and what I hope the audience realizes is you probably have a lot of things I could try. And you just kind of have to assume that I've been working this problem for a while and I've tried a lot of them.
Right.
And what the conclusion I've come to is I should have never started using Final Cut. Because once
you're locked in.
Once I did that, I locked myself in. Right. And I got in a position where for a long time, I was the only person that was producing, recording, editing, and publishing all these shows. And so I developed the most efficient, streamlined production pipeline possible to make it possible for one man to do all of that. And in doing so, I really ironed out the fastest way to produce content I can come up with. And Final Cut is an important part of that. And the situation now is replacing that tool would fundamentally change the amount of content I could produce or the enjoyment I have in producing that content, because I don't want to struggle with a tool either. That's because the problem is it's also a creative process. It's not just sitting down and punching in numbers. I am creating content. And so it's a creative, thoughtful process.
Well, and you have a schedule that needs to be like respected. Things can't take 3 times as long.
But God, I would do anything to be ignorant to the differences. I would really love to be able to go back in time, because then I would be on better hardware now, and maybe I would be working faster. What do I know? So my lesson here is don't get locked into any particular tool that you. And the tool being tied to a particular hardware vendor is really, that combo is really what screws me. If Final Cut was unshackled from Apple hardware, it would be a game changer. But that's never going to happen because it's tied into the OS so deeply.
I mean, we can abstract this out a little bit to even, in fact, I just had a conversation about a week and a half ago with somebody who their business is so locked into a legacy version of SharePoint that they don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's
It's the same idea. Once you are locked in,
or Access or SQL.
Oh God, how many things have I had to
Oh my God, dude, you would not believe the businesses I've seen run off Access databases.
Like huge, like I can't say the names, but huge companies that you've heard of are like one Access thing goes down and their business shuts down.
I can't say either, but there's businesses that some people, even people that don't live near me, their money probably flows through these businesses and they're running off Access databases.
And it is really, I mean, all right, Chris, I'm going to confess. I've done so many Access migrations to like MySQL databases now and Postgres databases that I'm not that scared when somebody says Access.
Yeah.
But SharePoint.
Think about all the businesses that are locked into Active Directory, right? Because their entire
not
permissions.
that bad though. You know what? You can. There is a path to migrate Active Directory.
I'm not saying it's the worst, but I mean, just in terms of like supporting, like so my version of lock-in. It's not in terms of the type of lock-in you can have. It's my one computer, and with my MacBook now, I spend 80% of my time in Arch, and I spend the rest of my time editing in Final Cut OS. And that's basically, I go into Final Cut OS and then I reboot back into Arch. I don't even have like my Chrome profile logged in or it's just a really plain editing system. And that's also why it's kind of stings me a little bit to spend that much money on a MacBook, because I don't take advantage of things like handoff, even though I have an iPhone, and I don't take advantage of iMessage, and I don't use iCloud. Like I don't use that stuff very much, so I don't really need the Mac ecosystem. I just need Final Cut. Lock in, Mike.
I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I
want to hear about your trip though.
Oh, so I hope I'm supposed to talk about this.
I thought, for part of me thought maybe you were never going back to Florida. I thought, man, because Mike, he went down there, he got his fill, but you've been back a couple of times, I think.
Yeah, well, I go there on vacation a lot because my wife has family there.
That's right, of course.
But also, I mean, I'm going to an SBA conference, but you know what? That's not the interesting trip. In 1 week, I'm going to Florida and Colorado. And Chris, I think you'll find Colorado interesting for a number of reasons.
Oh, really? I've been there myself, actually.
I'm sure you have. I'm amazed that you remember, but I'm sure you have. You druggie.
They are my bitter enemy because Colorado technically legalized cannabis after Washington, but they implemented it faster, and so they get all of the credit around the nation.
Yeah, I'm expecting to land and get a contact high almost immediately.
Yeah, you'd be surprised at how little you'd even notice, although you might see the stores from time to time. But that's not what you're actually going there for.
No, in fact, I'm not into that. So I will stick with my gin and juice or my martinis. I am going to visit the fine folks, the fine Ryan Snipes, whose name I constantly say wrong, at System 76.
I love it. So you're going down there. You got you're going to take like the Jupiter Broadcasting angle for me while you're there. Are you gonna like report on the entire event? Come back on the show.
You know what? Because I know how much you love Apple, I will try to get someone to do a video interview on my iPhone.
Wow. You see, I open it up as a nice compliment, like, yeah, Mike's going, he's going to rep, he's going to come back and give us a full report, and you take a shot.
I have to. You know how I am.
Yeah, have you had the lemur for over a year now?
Has it been a year? I don't think it's been
It's been a while. I feel like but that's awesome. And you've definitely spread the word on the show about the so you should be in the super fan category.
Email me asking about how do you like the lemur, and you know what the number one question I get from folks when they ask me about the lemur? Should I get the lemur or the oranx?
Yeah.
Which I find weird because they're
like,
very
well, what do you want? Do you
price.
want super portability or do you want super horsepower? Yeah, that's an odd one.
I mean, the serval is. Although I've never held either of those, but I'm excited to go. I mean, I don't know. I was told I was going to see some fun stuff. I don't know what that means. Ryan's an attractive guy, so that could be fun too.
Yeah. You could. You just kind of just stand next to him and absorb some of it.
Well, I'm hoping to somehow steal his hair care products.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Or at least get a few tips.
Get a few tips, something.
You know what you ought to do is what I would do is if you really invest in this, I would follow him home at night, right? And look in his window. And then you can just sort of observe naturally in his home habitat. I've done it before anyway, so don't worry about it.
I prefer looking through the bathroom window as he's showering. I mean,
yeah. Well, dude, just ask. I'll send you the RTMP feed. I've got a live stream.
That would be great. I mean, so I may not be going now because Ryan might just email. You know what? No.
Get it out of here.
No, I don't know a whole lot about it. They are doing an event. There's a very old-timey RPG style promo up for it, which looks cool. So when I get onto a plane with a broadsword, it'll be interesting. So
you can, if you're listening, you can find out at their website, and you can join. I think there's a video there. It gives you details on what you got to do, and I think it involves glitter. That's very cool, Mr. Dominic. I think you're gonna really like the team over there. They're a bunch of great people.
Well, my goal is to actually get someone to come back with me. So I'll already be in Colorado and fly to Washington State and kind of sit you down and have a Mac intervention.
I think you might own more Macs than I do. Just to be clear, I'm in media production. I'm in media production.
I own a Mac Mini to build a small army.
Oh man, yeah, a Mac intervention. All right, well, you know what? If that involves an Oryx Pro in tow, I might be receptive to that.
So you're open to bribes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sure.
Well, I think Tim Cook's got deeper pockets. He'll just show up with hey, I hear they can't even sell Mac Pros. Do you want one?
Yeah, Tim Cook showed up. He'd have an iPad in hand, and no thanks. It'd probably be a used iPad Mini. They're cheap.
Let's not pick on Tim. He got his salary cut 15%. That's rough.
Yeah, it's rough for Tim. You're right. Super rough for Tim.
I mean, being a multimillionaire, well,
what's ironic is that pay cut to him is less consequential than the cost of buying one MacBook would be to me, in terms of overall financial impact.
I'm not sure that I could buy a MacBook right now.
Yeah, that's like I said, Bitcoin is too low, and not only could I not buy it now, but I'd have to find a way to buy it that takes Bitcoin.
Do you really still have a ton of money in Bitcoin?
No, I got to be careful with it now. I got to be careful.
I thought Bitcoin was I checked. There was a what is it? Ether, the Ether currency.
Ethereum.
Mm-hmm. That was rough.
Yeah, Dogecoin, Litecoin, they've all been rough. But Bitcoin, it was just up above 1,100. And, I love it because people mocked me for doing it. I never think I never spent more than $150 on a Bitcoin, maybe at the peak. And now I've always spent when it's above 800. So I do that because I get so much more purchasing power. I've been able to keep Jupiter Broadcasting going by reinvesting that in the hardware here. It's literally been the lifeblood of hardware in this company now for years. It's one of the best business things I ever did. And who would have thought a crazy cryptocurrency would have turned out to be so good for? I mean, I could have cashed it out and I could have definitely used the money, but it's without it. I think we would have been up S Creek a few times throughout last year and the year before. It's been so I don't know how long it's going to be around, but I won't have Bitcoin for too long because I'm choosing to self-invest. I feel that way about
reselling Apple hardware.
Yeah, it is in a way. It's it's a self-investment. I don't have investors. We don't take on a huge, personal loans from the bank. So, but when you're a small business that's trying to grow and bring on more stuff, you gotta figure out something.
I feel your bootstrapping pain.
Amen, brother. Amen. Well, so do you know when you're going out there?
So yeah, this is tricky. So I'm actually flying from New Jersey to Orlando, and then this is February.
Whew.
I believe on the 9th, excuse the cough. On the evening of the 9th, I'm flying to Denver, and the event is on the 10th and the 11th of February.
Okay.
So if you're local to Denver, I obviously will not have an automobile, but if you want to meet up at a pub in town, I'm always happy.
Denver's got great public transportation.
Does it really?
Really
Okay.
solid. In fact, right up near the System 76 office, they got roads just for public transport. It's amazing. Before I was gonna say when you're traveling that much with a young family, make sure you have like FaceTime or Duo or whatever set up before you go, so that way you can.
Yeah, we have FaceTime. I mean, so my wife, ever the clever lady. Oh, you're going to Orlando? Well, me and Reese will go to Disney World.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because I needed a room anyway.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, cool. That's that helps with the travel a little bit. When I'm on the road, I try to FaceTime with the kids.
Yeah, it does. And then I'll only be gone for about, I think, 2 nights or 3 nights or something. Because when I go to Orlando, they're going to come home. Or when I go to Denver, they're going to come home. But I've actually never been to the city of Denver before that I recall.
It's nice.
So,
I have a YouTube video on the Jupiter Broadcasting YouTube channel about my visit last year. If you want to get a look at the area and see what the office looks like.
Now, is it a felony to view that video in New Jersey? I mean,
yeah, I'm not sure. There's a lot of porn in it, so it could.
No, porn is okay in New Jersey. I mean,
okay.
you met our past governors. I mean, they are fine with that.
Hey, the Hawk of Truth in the JB Hawk of Truth in the chat room says that he might be up for buying you a beer.
Sounds
I
good.
feel like you kind of owe him a beer though, because he's given us a lot of good titles. But that's just
yeah. Well, no, drinks are on me, JB Hawk. But yeah, let's hook up.
So that'll be cool. I can't wait to hear about that. And I say, Mr. Dominic, if you can, sneak out of there, because I have a sense you're going to be seeing some new KB Lake hardware. I would guess because they have a lot of lake stuff in their teaser here. You notice that?
Well,
KB Lake or whatever it's called. That's my guess.
I'm not sure if that teaser's current, but I'm bringing an empty carry-on, in case anything like falls off the factory line.
Oh, it's current. It's current.
Oh, it's current.
Oh, it's current. Yeah, I'd see the Legend of the Lake. Huh? Right?
All right. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, you get where I'm going with that? Mm-hmm. So I'm saying just walk out of there with an Oryx KB Lake, okay? That's all I'm asking for.
Yeah, let me just kind of slip through.
Yeah. That's going to be good. Well, all right, Mr. Dominic, is there anything else we want to cover on this legendary episode of the Coda Radio program where I got ribbed mostly through the entire episode?
And you deserved it.
I did. I really did. Well, I guess I'll add this. You can follow Mr. Dominic on the tweeters, and if you are going to be in the Denver area, that might be a great way to reach out. Mike, which Twitter handles should they contact, and for what reasons?
Follow @Tumanuco and @Buccaneer Tech. Also, go to Buccaneer.io. We're running some promos.
Hey, nice. Check that out. You can follow me. I'm @ChrisLAS. That vlog I mentioned, youtube.com/Chris Fisher, and the network @JupiterSignal, and our calendar for live times, jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. You'll also find a contact page there where you can send in a note to your very fine hosts, or you can engage on our subreddit at codaradio.reddit.com. Thanks so much for joining us this week. We'll see you right back here next week.